Look everybody, I own a Hasselblad. The cheapest actually, and also the worst. This is the Hasselblad True Zoom Moto mod made for Moto Z series phones. It basically just snaps onto the back of the phone like other Moto mods did. It basically uses these pins to interface with the phone and everything. And is basically in a way of adding optical zoom capabilities to a phone that otherwise doesn't have any. It has a 10 times optical zoom lens as the zoom implies, and you can get pretty far with that. The only problem is that the camera itself kinda sucks. It takes forever to boot up, the build quality is not great, the image quality definitely leaves something to be desired, which I'll show off later. The autofocus is ludicrously slow, especially if you're zoomed in all the way, and you'd be lucky to get a sharp shot when you're just trying to use this thing casually. Oh and yeah, as you saw right there, this thing has a built-in xenon flash, which is actually kinda cool. What's less cool is the fact that this Moto mod, unlike almost every single other one, doesn't have a built-in battery pack, meaning that this thing is leeching off the phone's battery for all of its power, so you'll need another battery pack Moto mod just to get enough charge to get through a day with this thing, because zooming is very intensive as you can imagine. But now on to specifications. This thing features a 1/2.3 inch size sensor, combined with a 4.5mm to 45mm lens. And this is kind of disappointing, because a lot of people were hoping this thing would have a 1 inch size sensor, as a lot of other point-and-shoots do, since this thing is essentially a point-and-shoot. But no, this sensor is only like 10% bigger than the one that's already inside the phone. And this leads to poor high ISO performance, which really didn't help this thing at all. And I can hear all the comments already. Hasselblad isn't all about having the fastest autofocus or the biggest specs. It's all about the image quality and the very sharp lenses. Yeah, about that. And you'd be right in some respects. The glass is bigger, and since it has optical zooming elements, it gets a lot further than you do with digital zoom. But even so, despite only having a 12 megapixel sensor, this thing is not as sharp as you'd expect. In fact, most of the image have a slight amount of chromatic aberration, and here's a really weird thing, they made the image circle too small. That's right, they probably should have made the lens actually bigger. But the thing is that the optics aren't that sharp. This is only a 12 megapixel sensor, and they don't even get that much sharpness out of it. Plus there's chromatic aberration, and there's still lens flares all over the place. And you'd probably think that one of the advantages of having a big lens on a phone would be having a shallow depth of field, but unfortunately only having the aperture of 3.5 means that this thing doesn't get much shallower depth of field than most point shoots do. And the bokeh you do get is really ugly in my opinion. Nothing that reminds me of an actual Hasselblad lens at all. But I suppose with all the specifications out of the way, we could probably get onto the real main event, which is photo quality, and this is where it gets a bit convoluted. You could either shoot JPEGs or RAW, and in the RAW format you can actually see the edges of the image circle, which is really distracting. And the JPEG, you can't see them at all, but they use some kind of weird lens distortion correction to fix it, which effectively crops your image and gives you even less megapixels than you were already getting, leading to frankly really soft and unappealing images, nothing like a Hasselblad at all. When you hear the word Hasselblad, you probably think of huge 100 megapixel medium format cameras used primarily in portrait studios or for product photography. You probably don't think of a cheap point-and-shoot attachment for a cell phone. But then something occurs to me. I have to stop treating the Hasselblad True Zoom like this kind of camera and treat it more like this kind of camera. Because in reality, the True Zoom shares more characteristics with this than it does with this thing. I made sure to keep in mind that I don't have the highest ISO performance or shutter speed available, so when I treated them more like a digicam, I was able to get some really solid results, and here they are. The Hasselblad True Zoom 10X shoots unimpressive 1080p video at 30 FPS only, and the main camera can shoot 4K in mind, I remind you. But this thing does have optical image stabilization, which kind of saves it a bit, but the video quality isn't good enough to the point where I'd consider using this over just a built-in camera. Essentially, the moral of the story is that when you treat this kind of camera the way that it wasn't intended to be used, you can get some decent results, but at the end of the day, I don't think I can really justify anyone else picking this up Unless they already have a Moto Z, because then you have to buy the phone and you have to buy the mod, which is still about $60. I just happened to get a good deal on one. But yeah, this has been the Hasselblad True Zoom Moto Mod, a pretty interesting moto mod from 2016 that produces pictures. And this is Calc G Extras, out.